Okay, today we're going to talk about podcasts. That's the theme of the day. And we touched it briefly, but what about you? Do you follow any podcasts? And what podcasts do you follow? Who has listened to a podcast? What podcast have you listened to? Okay, a fashion podcast. What about you? I'm sorry? Football Weekly, yeah. And was there someone else? You have not listened to a podcast in your whole life? That's very interesting because starting from today you will become podcasters. You will start from today to actually create a podcast. But I thought before we do that, we're going to take a look at what podcasts are. A podcast is it's not that complicated actually. It's a radio program. But the big difference is it used to be, nowadays we have, for instance in Finland, we have a distinction between state-run media, state-run radio, and we have commercial radio. And it used to be very, very hard to start a radio station. You would need to have all kinds of certificates and obviously the equipment and everything. So there were only a few to choose from. But nowadays, actually anyone can start a radio station. Having a podcast is basically having a radio station. But it's just slightly different with the help of internet. The consuming of podcasts is much easier and it's also more convenient than radio programs. Radio programs, as you know, if there's a certain program you want to listen to, then you would hang on by the radio. You would know what time it is broadcast and you would sit there and wait for the program to start. With podcasts, you can choose yourself because you download podcasts or you can also stream them. I've checked, I've opened iTunes. That's the prime distributor channel for podcasts. And I was going to ask you actually, can you just say any random subject? Anything? Perhaps something your fictitious company is doing or something else, and then we're going to check if there are podcasts about it. So, I'm sorry? Ooh, I'm sure there's going to be a lot about design. So when you, in iTunes, if you look for then it brings up a lot with also the word design in it. So maybe it should be, I guess, narrowed down a bit. Graphic design, let's see. Graphic design is interesting because without vision. But as you see here, we have podcasts, the deeply graphic design casts. So even if I would think graphic design is probably one of the worst subjects to talk about in a podcast because you don't have the visual. There's still a lot of podcasts, graphic design podcast, learn graphic design, etc. You can see. A font podcast. That's narrowing graphic design down to a podcast about fonts. And you can see that there's literally endless. And normally, these are all free. So if you have a problem finding entertainment, then I strongly suggest you start using podcasts. I think they're very good for just for entertainment reasons, but I also think they are very good for learning reasons. And podcasts are different from other social media, I would say, in a number of ways. Because if we talk about, for instance, YouTube videos, What's the number one thing to think about if you make a YouTube video? What's important? I'm sorry? Subscription, yes. But about the format, it should be very short.